Thank you for guessing that. I appreciate it. What else do they have in common? Yes? They do all have credit cards. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. But what else might they have in common? These, my friends, are the top largest banks in the entire world. Their total volume is around $700 billion. I'm here to share with you what's really exciting about that is that we have a program specifically designed by the government called the Farm Credit System, which I'm here to talk to you about on behalf of them this evening, that comes in at $763 billion. Why should this be a surprise to you? Out of all the financial markets out in the world, agriculture, people that are committed to rural communities and agriculture, is one of the largest banking institutions in the entire world. Now, you won't see Farm Credit's brand on a lot of different places like the New York Stock Exchange or being talked about on MSNBC, but all the money that flows through Farm Credit flows into the rural communities that many of you grew up in, number one. But number two, also is sourced directly from Wall Street. And so the coolest thing about Farm Credit that I want you to take away from tonight is that there is no other organization like Farm Credit that takes money from Wall Street and injects it right into the rural communities that many of us grew up loving and still do today. And so I'm excited to be here with you all tonight. My name is Micah Mensing, and I'm the Customer Education Manager for Farm Credit Mid-America. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and where we do that. Our mission is to secure the future of rural communities and agriculture, and so we do that through a variety of different ways. One of those ways is by providing credit, providing loans, and making sure that the folks that we're giving money to have an understanding of how to manage that money. So that's really where I come in, to be able to an educational resource to our young and beginning farmers so that we don't slap them up with $1 million in debt, send them on their way, and never talk to them again, much like the student loan environment. Right. So where are we located? Across the Mid-American territory is Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, a little bit of Arkansas, and Missouri. We have 21 offices here in the state of Ohio with a total of 1,500 team members and inject about $40 billion into this territory that we serve. So you might be asking, why did Garrett ask me to come tonight to talk to you? My goal is really threefold. The first thing is to provide you with a little bit of education and tie it back to the farm, but also give you a nugget that you can take away and say, as a college student, at the stage of life that I'm in right now, I have the ability to make a difference, to make a change in my financial future. The second piece is I want you to understand is that if you leave Ohio State and you decide one day that you want to do something that requires more money than you have in your bank account, I want you to understand that Farm Credit could be there for you, especially as you're starting out within agriculture. And the third is support you through your growth and on your farm growth as you go through those different stages of life, from young and beginning farmer to traditional portfolio. And we're going to talk about what each of those are. So let's start with this question. Who can tell me what percentage of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck? 82. I've got a gift card for you. I appreciate that guess. It is close. It's 63%. How many of you raise your hand if you're surprised by this? You think it's going to be, you thought it was going to be more than that, right? Yeah. 63% of folks have to wait until the 15th and 31st to decide if they're able to do even some of the most basic things, right? That's pretty concerning. So oftentimes, especially in this stage of life, how do we feel when we're thinking about our very first job out of college? How many of you right now would take a $100,000 paycheck if Micah said, come work at Farm Credit tomorrow? Perfect. Absolutely, right? Let me tell you a little bit of a scenario. When Micah graduated from Ohio State, he started working at Farm Credit. My very first job offer was $45,000 as an account specialist. Now, going from making absolutely nothing over in ag admin, right, to being offered $45,000, I thought that was the cat's meow, right? I was real excited. I started to work, and then I started to realize these colleagues around me were making maybe $50,000, $60,000. And I found myself in this awful scenario where you start to do comparison. How many of you have ever compared yourself to somebody else, maybe? It happens all the time, right? We live in an awful environment that requires us to do it. And so then you start to think to yourself, well, if my 45 isn't enough, I can only imagine if I made 60 or if I made 55. Life would be completely different. I'm talking Miami on the weekends. We're going to the bar every chance that we get, and we're buying around for everybody. We are going to be the cool kid. But guess what? It really doesn't make all that much difference. So those that are making over $100,000, or 45% of them, are still living paycheck to paycheck. What's the message here? Live within your means. Say it again.
I just said we have bad spending habits.
We have bad spending habits. Both of those are absolutely correct. Here's what I want you to know is that no matter whether you make $45,000 or you make $100,000, the things that you do today are going to be the things that you do tomorrow, and that will result in what your financial success is. 47% of Americans can't cover a $500 emergency, and that is something that a lot of people struggle with. And so as we go through today, I want you to be thinking about that dollar amount, and I want you to be thinking about what you need to do to maybe get yourself where that you could cover that. I had a friend of mine that he said, you know, my kid, I think his boy was like maybe 6, 7 years old. He said, I make sure that every time he gets money for Christmas, his birthday, whatever, it goes into a savings account so that he could have $500 into an account if there was ever an emergency. And I said, Brandon, what type of an emergency is a 7-year-old going to have? Anybody have any ideas? No, he didn't either. He said it doesn't matter what emergency a 7-year-old has. He said what matters is that if my 7-year-old has $500 today, they will have $500 when they're 15. They will have $500 when they're 25, and they won't be a part of your statistic, right? Well, what I want you to take away right now is that goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the process that lead to those results. And so tonight we're going to talk about some of those systems that you can build into your life today so that if you don't have $500 today, you'll hopefully have it in 6 months or a year. And when you're 25, you're going to have $500 or more to be able to be a part of this society that is not necessarily living paycheck to paycheck and feels that financial freedom. Now, I have to admit, there's two types of people in this world. My colleague, Robbie Alexander, told me this when I was just starting out at Farm Credit, and it's something that I've always kind of thought a lot about. He said, Micah, there's two different types of folks. There's the type of folks where their parents hand them $20, and they go and they've got to buy their shoes with that $20. How many of you grew up in a household like this? I know I did. There's the other type, which obviously is 98% of you, so congratulations. There's the other type where their parents hand them the $20 and say, hey, don't spend that. I'm going to show you how to make that into 40. These two different thought patterns are the difference between the folks that will retire and feel like they have a good enough cushion to enjoy the final stages of life, right? And the folks that are going to continue to have to make the sprint for as long as they possibly can. So we're going to talk about what those systems could be real quickly. I've got about 25 minutes left, and so I wanted to be able to kind of dive into what Farm Credit views as an ideal budget so that at the end of tonight, you can go home and just start to think about what your expenses are. I want to talk through an example here in just a moment. 30% housing debt. This is going to be a little bit different for you at this stage of life with renting, right? I hope that it's significantly less than that, but not necessarily, depending on the type of apartment or place that you have here on campus. You always are going to account for 30% of your income being taken out in taxes. Consumer debt would be things like your food or credit cards or whatever that may be that you're spending for 10%, spending another 20%, and then that final savings and investment. In Micah's ideal world, what I would do is I would reduce that housing debt to probably 20%. Taxes have to stay the same, and then I would take that extra 10% and move it into savings investments so that you were around spending 20% and saving and investing 20%. This is really difficult to do. In fact, have anybody heard of Mint.com? A couple of us? So Mint.com is a system that was created by TurboTax or Intuit, And it tracks all of your income and all of your expenses, and then at the end of the month, you can see where are you spending your money. And I started to do this in probably a junior year of college, and I started to get extremely discouraged because guess what? I had a ton of expenses and about no income, right? How many of you feel, and I don't want you to raise your hand, how many of you feel like right now, the money that you do generate in college has to go to just living your life in college, right? It is so hard to be able to say that I'm going to, this is what my parents always told me, just pay the interest on your student loans, Mikey, you'll thank yourself later. I'm like, pay the interest? That's $78. I could get Starbucks 3 times or I could pay my interest. What do you think I'm gonna do, Dar? That's my mom's name, right? So these are the options that you have to go through in your life right now, but I'm telling you that if you can just sneak a little bit, 5-10% into that savings investment, you will thank yourself later. So, I want you to think about everything you've spent this week and tell me how much or what that number is. Credit cards, cash, dining dollars, whatever it may be.
Probably like $100.
You think about $100 over the last 7 days?
Oh, probably.
$250 over the last 7 days. Feel like an auctioneer? Anybody else got a higher bid? You think you've all spent less than that? Less than $250? You're pretty confident in that, okay?
That might be a 300. I pay my car insurance.
Car insurance. That one eats it up.
Not just 300, but I forgot about that too.
Yeah. Anybody else? 250, 300, 400? Does anybody think they've hit 500 so far this week?
Oh, this week. You know, my friend was this week.
On average, Americans will spend $164 per day. 164 per day. How do I get to this number? Well, go ahead and take your rent, whatever that may be. Mine is $1,500. I take my $1,500, I divide that by 31 days. That starts to add up. I then take the fuel that I drive to work, about $80 a week. Go ahead and split that up per day. And on average, folks are spending around $164.55 per day. So this is why these systems that we're going to start talking about are so important. One of the things that I absolutely love about my job and hated about money before I started in this role was that nobody talks about it. It's sacred, right? You have a couple jobs as a farmer. Farmer's job number 1 is to prove to the government they make no money and prove to their lender they do. If you grew up in an agriculture home, you know why that's funny, right? Because farmers don't like paying taxes. If you didn't, let me use this analogy. Your job in college is to prove to everybody else around you that you've got the nicest and newest clothes and probably the coolest car on campus, even though you may be doing it all on student loans. It's okay. Everybody is in a different spot at a different time in their life, right? But I want to be very transparent with you from my experience, my perspective of what works for me, because money is not something that we should be afraid or bashful of talking about, because everybody is dealing with it, right? It is what runs our life if we're being honest. It is the thing that separates us from the haves and the have-nots. It's the thing that allows us to experience so many different things in the world. So we should be open and willing to discuss it. So let me tell you what do I do in my household. So, housing and debt, no more than 40% automatically paid for my checking. So, today is the 18th. On the 13th, I think it was, Monday was a holiday. On the 13th, Micah got paid. Farm Credit said, you did a good job, boy. Here's another 2 weeks. Go ahead, right? Have at it. So I dropped into my checking account was my paycheck. From there, what I did is I automatically moved $800 into a separate account. I call this my rent account. That's what it's labeled as. And every 2 weeks, I take $800 from that paycheck, I move it into my rent account, so that when the 31st comes and I have to pay $1,450 in my rent, that money is there. Micah, you've got a little extra laying over. What's that for? Well, $91 in gas this past month because we ran the heater, right? We've got another $60 in electric, and maybe $50 a month or so in Spectrum Internet. But what my goal is to build 3 months of a cushion into that rent account so that if Farm Credit one day decides on the 31st that they say, you didn't do a good job this time, boy, go find something different, that I've got a place to live for at least 3 months. This is what I call like the clearinghouse, right? So you want enough money to go in to cover your expenses just so that you can pay. Why is it important to do this? Because psychologically then when you look into your primary checking account and you go to swipe that debit card or credit card, your bills are already paid, right? You're not thinking about, well, there was an extra $1,400 in there. I could get a little crazy this month, right? You don't ever want to get in that position. The next is that automatically from that checking account, that where that money was deposited, I took 10%, I moved that to a Discover savings account. Why did I move it to that Discover? Because it's a high yielding savings account. Right now it's generating just under 4.5% interest, and I want that money to sit there and stay, right? Those are going to be for things like when I want to buy a home someday, I have a down payment. Those are going to be for the days where maybe I do lose my job or the worst case scenario happens and I need to sustain myself and my family for the next 3 to 6 months without any income. And then the last piece, right, is this investment. A lot of times this happens automatically. You can set up things on your account where money just moves automatically. I use an app called Acorns. I'll show you that here in just a moment. But another 10% and to go into a different account where you could lose that money and be perfectly okay with it if the stock market crashes. You don't depend on it, right? But you do have the ability to say one day this money will be useful to me as the stock exchange continues to rise, right? As the return on investment continues to be greater than 10%. Why do I do that? It's so that every dollar that I have left in that primary checking, I know that that's my fun money, right? That's what I get to use if I want to go skiing this weekend when it snows. That's what I get to use when Taylor says, hey, I want to go out to dinner tonight, and we're going to go to Olive Garden and spend $70 on breadsticks and salad, right? Like, that's where that money goes. So, I wanted to take a brief moment just to talk about credit cards. How many of you have a credit card? How many of you explain or understand your credit score? A little bit. So we get credit cards, and I had one at college too, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I encourage it. But what is your credit score telling you? It's your financial GPA, right? And so it is telling me as a lender, if you come to me and say, hey, I want a loan for a car, or I want a loan for a house, I'm going to look at that and say, Garrett, your credit score is a 580. That tells me that you probably are not real trustworthy. And some decisions are going to be made exclusively on credit score. Farm Credit, we don't, but a lot of like home loans or car loans or small term loans are made on credit score exclusively. This is can be kind of a scary thing, but there's 3 different main reporting agencies: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and it's important to monitor your credit score. You can do it through a variety of ways: annualcreditreport.com, mint.com, Credit Karma. Many of you, if you have like a Discover, your FICO score is automatically in that, right? Why am I telling you at the age of 22 to monitor your score? Why does it matter? Yeah. You are going to want to buy a house, but you've got plenty of time, right? It can be difficult to move, yes?
Lane credit is a big part of this.
It is, absolutely. Any other guesses? $79% of them have mistakes. So, statistically speaking, there's at least a few of you in here right now that haven't checked your credit report recently. And unfortunately, somebody stole your identity, your credit, and maybe they've decided to go open a credit card in your name and they decided to go to Hawaii even though you didn't get to go, right? Or, worst case scenario, and we see this a lot of times with folks that are older, is they will look at their credit report and they'll see they have medical collections on it. I'm going to give you a quick example. 2 years ago, I had kidney stones, and I had to go to the emergency room. And when I went to the emergency room, I got taken care of. I was out within probably 12 hours. all was well, I ended up with 4 different invoices from that one visit. Because guess what? The emergency room bills you. The technician that read the x-rays bills you. Then the ER doctor bills you. And I forget what anesthesiology maybe was the other one, was the 4th billing. Well, what happens when you get 4 different bills and you think they're all for the same thing? You don't pay something right away. Before you know it, 60 days in, they've sent you to collections because they only have to send you technically 2 notices before they do it. This happens to folks all the time. Bad judgments can follow folks for 7 years. And so I always encourage, every time we get in front of a group, that if you ever get the opportunity, please, just pull up your credit report. Do it on one of those sites where it's not going to impact your credit, and just make sure that everything that's on there is legit. Can you dispute them? Absolutely. If you find them too late, it makes it a whole heck of a lot harder. Does anybody have any questions around credit score so far? This is kind of one of those ways that I like to dispel the scariness that comes with credit scores, but also give you some really good insight. Payment history. 100% of the time is absolutely critical. Payment history comes down to you making the minimum payment. Micah always wants you to make more than the minimum payment, right? Because if you're only making minimum payment, interest is going to accrue. And when interest accrues, your credit card balance grows, right? If you miss just one payment, 99%, if you make them all the time except for once, that drops it down to good almost automatically. I want to draw your attention to the very far left column. 35% of your credit score is based on that one factor. So when you think about having that 800 credit score or that 700 credit score, it physically is not possible to get there until you've gotten in good graces with your credit card again. If you miss payments consistently, you're going to drop down to that good, and already at 2 missed payments, you're going to be in the not bad. When you get down to 3 or more, you're in the poor section. It will destroy your credit quickly. If you don't have the cash in your account, don't use the card, is what it comes down to. Credit utilization, 0 to 20% is excellent. What this means is that Micah has a key bank credit card. The limit on it is $10,000. If I use $9,000, my credit utilization is going to be in that 61 to 100, and it's going to be very bad. Credit cards give you big limits. They only want you to use a small amount of it. So every month, I try to keep that $10,000 credit card under maybe $2,000, $1,500 to $2,000. And it's paid off every single month to make sure that we don't get ourselves into issues. This is what you were talking about, length of relationship. Why does Micah hate this one? Because it's just not fair, right? I'm 27 years old, and I, to date, still do not have anywhere near the excellent category. Why do I not have anywhere near the excellent category for length of relationship? Because it's just not physically possible, right? Unless you're on maybe mom or dad or older sister's, sister or brother's credit card. Many of you didn't get credit until you were probably 18. And so it will absolutely be until you're 27, 28, maybe 30, before you get to a point where the average of your credit is longer than 9 years. This one is kind of a bear. It doesn't affect it a whole lot, only 15%, but is worth noting. And then lastly, types of credit and credit inquiries. The types of credit, they want you to have over 22 different accounts. It sounds crazy. I don't have 22 accounts, right? It's going to take you a while to get there, and that's okay. You do not want to go in and just open a bunch of accounts and say, Mike, I got to 22. Where's my 850 credit score, right? That is not what I am saying. What I am saying is that by the mid-stage of life, they're saying on average, folks will have around 20 to 25 different credits. Here's the benefit, is that over my course of my 4-year education, I probably took 6 to 8 different loans, student loans out. Each of those count as a credit, right? And so when I graduated, I had 6 different types of credit on my account already. So that is helpful, and may be helpful to some of you as well. And then finally, credit inquiries, that 0 to 1 is really where you want to be. You might be asking, Micah, what if I want to shop around when I'm buying a car to see what kind of rate I can get? That's perfectly fine, just do it in a small window. If you do a bunch of different loan applications within a 2-week time period, most of the time the credit reporter will identify that that's what you're doing, and they'll combine those all into one credit report. We're going to go through this. You all know that. Any questions on credit? How many of you are interested in retiring at some point? Yeah, a couple of us. Excellent. That's the goal, right? So for every decade that someone delays saving the required investment amount to reach their savings goals triples. Why? How is that even physically possible? 2 words. Who can tell me what they are? Compound interest. Yeah, absolutely. What's the idea of compound interest? 1 penny doubled every day for 30 days would turn into over $5 million, right? The idea is that when you put money into an account, something like this happens. The very bottom of this is what we call principal. That is the dollars that you put in. The second layer of this is interest that's not compounding. So if you are in a checking account, as an example, it's probably not compounding, and when you put your money in, it will continue to pay you interest on whatever that principal amount is, without the interest that it pays you. How many of you are confused yet? A couple of us. Let me take it a step further. If we have a compound interesting account, like most savings accounts, the bank is going to look at your balance at the end of every month, regardless of who put that money in there, and they are going to pay you on that balance. So let me give you an example. If Micah puts $500 into his Discover savings, and at the end of the month, they pay me 1%, then they're going to put, let's say, what, 50, I don't do math. What's 51% of 500? 50 cents, 5 cents, something like that, right? They're going to put 50 cents in there, let's say, for easy math. At the end of that month, they're paying those 50 cents, and then next month, they're going to pay me interest on how much? $500.50. And if they put another, let's say 55 cents in this month, because I had a bigger balance, then the following month, they're going to pay me interest on $501.05. So every month it is going to grow regardless if I put money in there myself, because you're paying interest on interest and principal. Is everybody with me? This is extremely important when thinking about retirement. I oftentimes will get in front of groups and say, how many of you plan to be a millionaire? Not many people raise their hand. The reality is everybody in this room will be a millionaire. Millionaire is a term that we all grew up thinking was absolutely not possible. Most of the folks that are retiring today are millionaires. Why do they have to be millionaires? Because this thing called inflation. So if you're under the age of 25, you're probably going to have to be having around $3, $4, maybe even $5 million in a retirement account. For folks that are older, 45 years old, they're probably going to be doing okay with about $1 million to $2 million. This is just the reality of it. The other reality of it is that you cannot save yourself into retirement. You have to use accounts like investments, or you have to use accounts with compound interest so that you can continue to grow that dollar year over again. How many of you understand investing? My hand would not have been up at your stage of the game. In fact, I don't know that I truly still understand it 100%. I have a better knowledge now, but oftentimes when I would sit in these personal finance lectures, I hated when they would talk about 10% returns on things and never tell me how to do it. So I have about 5 minutes left before Garrett throws me out of here. And so I want to just take this 5 minutes and I want to explain this really well. When people talk about investing, what they're talking about is you taking money and putting it into an account that is then buying stocks. Where are these stocks, or what are they? These stocks are on the New York Stock Exchange, and they are shares of a company. So let me take one of my favorite companies as an example. Tesla. I really enjoy Elon Musk. I think he's batshit crazy, and I love it, right? And so I will buy Tesla stock all day, every day, right? I'm going to put my money into an account, and I'm going to say, Elon, I vote for you, right? And then what's going to happen is I'm going to take my $5 that I have in that account, and I'm going to buy a fractional share of Tesla. Now, Tesla is probably trading at $400 or $500 a share. but I can buy a fractional share of that. So I only own a little bit of it, right? And when Elon goes to his books on December 31st, and he says, wow, we have the #1 selling sedan on the roads in the United States. Thank you, shareholders. I'm going to pay you back by sharing some of my profits. And he's going to go out, and he's going to post their financial statements, and the stock market's going to go wild and get excited because Tesla made money. Guess who owns a tiny little piece of Tesla? I do. And so I get some of that percentage back. Now here's where I often got held up with not understanding investments. How to physically go out and do it. I will tell you, it is easier now than it ever has been, right? Before, you often had to work with a broker at Fidelity or an organization like that, Edward Jones. Today, honestly, during COVID, more organizations popped up that allow you to take the broker completely out of the equation and do it directly on your phone. What are some of those? Acorns, Betterment, Robinhood. These are investment options for you. These are apps for you where you can put money into it, buy whatever stocks you want, and watch and see what happens. If you are somebody like myself that is interested in a specific company or thinks, right now the government is crazy, there's a lot of world issues going on, and military industrial complex is probably going to do great over these next 2 years. I'm going to invest in somebody that builds cannons and bombs, right? Why am I going to do that? Because I think, based on my interpretation of the market, that's going to be an area that's going to be profitable. Now, you may not have that opinion, and you may say, Micah, I don't really care about the news, I don't watch it, and I really don't have any companies that I'm interested in. This first piece is for you. Edward Jones, Fidelity, Vanguard, Bank of America. They have different investment accounts where you could technically work with somebody. On average, that top one requires about $15,000 to $25,000 minimum investment. Now, if I were you, I would be sitting in my chair saying, you're crazy. There's not a single person in this room that's got $25,000 that they want to just throw at Tesla and see what happens, right? So let's go back down to this bottom section again. I kind of think about it in a way of let's start here, let's walk here, and let's run here, right? When you're 30, 35 and really getting into it, this is probably where you're going to be. Here, this is let's just explore what the stock market has to offer. These have what they call robo-advisors. What this does is taking AI, and it's based on what you tell it, it's your risk preferences, it will generate and buy stocks based on that. So you could say, I want very low, moderate risk. And it's going to go out and it's going to buy bonds, and it's going to buy real low-risk stocks. An example of that might be Campbell's Soup, right? Campbell's Soup has been around for a long time, but it's a sexy stock. It pays about 15%, 10-15% on average every year with its dividends included. Why is it sexy? Because nobody cares about what Campbell's Soup thinks about the political market, right? Nobody cares about whether or not they've changed their area on the shelf. People will always buy Campbell's. They will always do it. It's been around forever, and so because of that, it's a very, very safe stock. Any questions on investments of what we've covered so far? Do we feel like we have a better understanding than we did when we walked in around investing? Do me a favor when you get home tonight, look at these 3 things and download just one, right? I don't care if you decide to skip on the Starbies tomorrow. Take your now it's like $6, which really annoys the living daylights out of me. Take your $6, don't get the white chocolate mocha, and buy a share of Tesla and see what happens, right? Just so that you can start to kind of get a feel for it. So, what are you going to do when you leave here? First off, I want you to start thinking through what systems you can build for yourself, like I have for myself, right? When you get paid, where does your money move, and how do you set yourself up for success to ensure that you're not spending more than what you're actually needing to be or earning, and that you're always covering your bases? I want you to track your expenses. Over the next couple days, when we were just talking about, how much have you spent, you threw out some estimates, 250, 500 maybe. I want you to just in a note on your phone, every time you buy something, literally anything, no matter how minute it is, I want you to write it down, and I want you to see, just at the end of next Thursday, I want you to just tally that all up and see where that number came in. I guarantee you're going to hate yourself, right? It's okay. We all spend a lot. It's the reality. That's why I got to $164. But the more that you acknowledge that, the more that you write that down, the more conscious decisions that you're going to make when you are actually spending. I want you to beef up your savings if at all possible, but more importantly, I want you to check your credit history. If there's anything that you heard me tonight, that's the one thing that I absolutely want you to do. And I want you to start thinking about that retirement piece. What are you going to do to become a millionaire, right? We're all, at this point, we are all going to be millionaires unless we are all going to be greeters at Walmart when we're 75, and that's okay too, right? As long as they still have greeters. Maybe that will be AI as well. We're not quite sure yet. But I want you to start thinking about what you can do when you start to retire. And the last thing that I want to leave you with before I close out here is that when I graduated and no, I still have it today, a note in my phone, I just set 3 simple goals for myself. In fact, I'm going to pull it up just so I can make sure I'm 100% honest with you. When I graduated, I had 4 bullet points. The first was to put away 10% of each paycheck into a savings account. So that $45,000 salary that I was making, my rent was I think $625 in Millersburg, Ohio, and I took 10% of that money, right? I put it into a savings account just for a rainy day, right? The second thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to match 6% on my 401k. Why did I pick this number? Because that is what my employer match guarantee was. So if Micah put 6% in, Farm Credit would put 6% in, right? And no matter what that number is for you when you get that first-time job, I want you to match it. Because if not, you're leaving money on the table, right? The third thing is I wanted to put $400 into my rent account. Times have changed, right? I said I do $800 a paycheck now versus the $400 when I lived in Millersburg. Cost of living in that hour-and-a-half difference is huge, right? The fourth and final thing that I had on there was pay off that smallest loan first, and I started that debt snowball, right? So when I graduated, I had about $31,000 in debt. And I told you on average there was about 6 different loans. And so what I did is I took that smallest loan, and I think the balance on that smallest one was $3,000. And every time I got a paycheck, I put that 10% into savings. I moved that $400 into my rent account. And then I thought to myself, instead of making that $150 a month payment, what if I made $225, right? And I just threw $75 extra dollars in it. And I'll promise you that once you get into this idea of like starting to pay these off, it really does get fun. I'm a geek around money. My wife hates it. But I will tell you that when you start to pay things off, you're going to feel so good about it. The momentum is going to feel great. And before you know it, you've got that smallest one paid off, and you're wanting to pay off the second and the third and the fourth. Just a real brief overview. Our Farm Credit Association has a program called Growing Forward. It's for folks that are 18 to 35 years old that have a desire to get into agriculture full-time. So if you're in the stand and you're somebody that wants to be involved in agriculture or go back to the family farm, I want you to talk to me about this. We relax our underwriting standards. We provide education and business planning support to these folks so that we make sure that they have the resources to be able to start their farming operation on the right foot. The last thing is I want to leave you is that if your parents are customers or you are yourself, we have a $1,500 tuition scholarship available. And the most impressive program that we have is our Scholars Program. Has anybody in here been a part of that? Yeah, Garrett? Yeah. So the Scholars Program is so super cool. It allows us to be able to identify, 20 students or so from across our territory, give them $5,000 over 2 years, but honestly I think the most impressive part of it is kind of the network that's built between the students across the Ohio State, Purdue University, University of Tennessee. And then we also bring those folks down to Louisville for a week, do some more leadership training, and then as a capstone experience, we take them away. So like this past year, we went to Washington, D.C. and spent a weekend there doing some lobbying work and learning about policy. The year before that, I took the group to Gettysburg to go through and learn about the Civil War and leadership lessons that you could learn from that time period. So if that's something you're interested in, ask Garrett, stick around, ask me, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. But with that, I'm out of time, so I appreciate you all listening, and I'll answer any questions that y'all have.